So, hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unpacking Possibility. I'm your host, Traci Stein, as always. I'm happy and I'm grateful to be here with you. I really do appreciate the time that you allocate to spend with me. I know time for all of us, time and energy are in kind of short supply. So, today's episode, I think, might be a little more serious, but as always, it's something I wanted to talk about with you with the intention of helping you feel better, do better, and live better overall. I want to just give you a little heads up. There is not going to be anything that should be traumatizing in this episode, even though I'm going to talk about things that might be a little bit weighty. If you find that it is not for you, I get it. But what I want to talk about today is kind of these things that come together in my mind that are very much out in the world, in the information sphere at this time, and how we can use our innate wiring, our innate ability to tap into and notice and understand our own intuition to keep us safer, right? Safer from the little things that might not be that harmful and things that could be. So I want to start out by talking about some stuff that's been in the media. I want to give you another heads up. This is not a political episode. I am not naming any political figures. As people look at what's in the news, they can decide for themselves how much of a deep dive they do or don't want to take in this area. And, I get that for some people, it's like, no, I want to focus on my own life, my family, my job, whatever. And I get it. And I get why. So you're probably like, what the heck is she going to talk about? And what I'm going to talk about are our tendency to invest a lot of our faith and trust in public figures. Again, I'm literally going to name one who is not a political figure. How to get a better sense of whether somebody really has our best interests at heart or not, and how our intuition can play a very vital role in keeping us safe. And we'll talk about, one tool at least that can help us further recognize our intuition and tell the difference between that and, all the mental noise, thoughts, feelings, hopes, fears, biases, etc. that we have. So, the only trigger warning I'm going to give is that I am going to make a reference to some person, again, not a political figure, and I'm not going to provide any gory details whatsoever, but a person who is recently come out to have been in the to be in the Epstein files. I'm sure 99% of you know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to elaborate on what those are. You can look that up if you want, but I think most people know what I'm talking about. But just to summarize or give a quick overview, what we're finding out is that, in the last week, 3 million files have been released from the United States Department of Justice of emails and videos and photos related to Jeffrey Epstein, and a wide swath of people have been disclosed to have been in the files as people who are his friends, as people who have likely or definitely participated in just awful things. Again, I'm not going into detail. I'm just using this to introduce the larger issue, believe it or not, of what I'm going to talk about. But some people will not surprise you, and some people will. Again, people across the political spectrum. But in those files, some of the surprising things, and maybe some people won't be surprised, were people who are public figures who are people who specifically put themselves out there as health experts, wellness experts, and so forth. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because we live in an age where so many people are pulling for our belief in them, our trust in them, our devotion to them. People on social media, wellfluencers, as they can be called, pull for us to rely on them, oftentimes more than conventional medical advice or our own healthcare providers or whatever. And I'm not even going to delve into that because that's not even the issue I most want to talk about. But people can be so charismatic, right? And it can be people in our daily lives. It could be the teacher, the coach, the neighbor, whatever, super charismatic. They can kind of draw us in to the point where we instinctively dismiss our own intuition saying something doesn't feel right. And that's kind of the larger thing of what I want to talk about. The person who I'm going to mention briefly, who is in the Epstein files, who is a wellfluencer, a physician influencer, is just to give you an example of how, the public's attention has been so expertly seduced into giving our time and money to people who purport to have information that can help us, right? But some of these people are not trustworthy, are not the people they purport themselves to be, maybe don't have your best interests at heart, and it can be complicated. So let me get to the point of the person I'm using as an example. I'm not the only person to talk about this person. They've been, if you're on Twitter, they're all over there. Basically, this is a physician influencer with a, New York Times bestselling book, a very lucrative, kind of concierge health advisor practice, because this person didn't finish residency. So he's not actually, I don't believe he's actually seeing patients clinically. He's probably advising them at $100,000 a pop, but this is somebody who is a known longevity expert. In this case, the person is Dr. Peter Attia. Again, he didn't finish residency, so it's not somebody you'd probably normally go to see. But the long story short is that, he's an example of people that we follow because we believe they have access to information that will help us, and that is information we ourselves don't have access to. And, none of us could be an expert in everything by any means. And can somebody who, by the way, didn't finish residency still review the research and have knowledge, medical knowledge, and distill the research down and help advise people? Technically, yes. I followed him briefly on Twitter. I'd subscribed to the newsletter. I didn't get the weird feeling about what I'm going to share, but I got the weird feeling like, this is kind of like, he just seemed to me just like a narcissistic guy. And I just thought this isn't a fit. And I thought, there's a whole bunch of other people I could follow to learn more about what he's talking about if I really want to. But anyway, Dr. Attia I'm mentioning because he is like the classic example of someone who very easily cultivates a following. He's extremely, depending on your opinion, he's a very handsome guy who's in very good shape. He is well-spoken. He's bringing to the public information about how they could live healthier and longer, right? So, of course, that's engaging. He's got a big social media presence and I believe a podcast. He was just going to be on CBS as a regular medical contributor. And now I think, thankfully, that is not going to happen. And I'll tell you why I'm saying thankfully. So anyway, in the Epstein files, Dr. Peter Attia has been found to, in the list, in the batch of 3 million documents that have just been released by the Department of Justice, it's obvious that he's had about 1,000 email exchanges with Jeffrey Epstein. He has a worshipful kind of, like there's a worshipful flavor to these emails to Jeffrey Epstein, a uniquely horrible human being. And when this first came to light, he, it was only a matter of days ago, released this email to his social media fans and his staff that, it wasn't that many and, and he had never been to the island and he was naive and he's ashamed and he used poor judgment with some humor that was inappropriate. Now, if you read the statement, which I did, you'd say, okay, it seems like he could take more responsibility, but is it possible? Like, I didn't realize it was 1,000 emails he exchanged. I thought, maybe it's 2. I don't know. Maybe he didn't know. He suggested he didn't know who Jeffrey Epstein really was and what he was doing or accused of doing. But then you see that the jokes are very intimate. They are in bad taste. I'm not going to go into detail. You could look them up if you want, but it's more than that. There's like a fangirling attitude. And he, in fact, refers in the emails to the fact that he there's no way he could ever share with people like who Jeffrey Epstein really is and what he's up to and what he's like. But it's almost like an affectionate type of joking in these emails. And in his public apology, Peter Attia said, like, he was naive and he didn't know. Almost like, oh, this poor guy. Now he's being vilified for having emailed this guy, but he didn't know any better. He said basically Jeffrey Epstein was a wealthy and charismatic guy. I don't even know if he said the charismatic point, but that gave him access to people who could help fund his work when he was early in his career. Now, if all that were true and it was like 2 emails or something, and maybe it was a dinner with, I don't know, people willing to fund whatever, longevity research, I mean, it wouldn't be great, but it was much more than that. And that brings me back to when we have a vibe about somebody or a situation, and I'm talking about us as consumers and in our daily lives, it's so hard to respect that vibe in the face of other people's social approval of someone, or a great resume, or somebody who's charismatic. And it just, I kind of want to put a bow on the Peter Attia thing because less people think I'm being too harsh or, don't judge him before, all the information's out. I just wanted to say that to me, this is like the nail in the coffin of his reputation. But in his own best-selling book, which people are pointing out a lot, his best-selling book, Outlive, about longevity, Dr. Peter Attia says that he shares this anecdote about when his 1-month-old son was extremely ill and almost died and had to go to the ICU, the intensive care unit at the hospital. Peter Attia's wife begged him to come home, and that's his words, not mine. She begged him for 4 days to come home and come to the hospital to be with her, with their son. Again, their 1-month-old son almost died in an intensive care unit, where she was alone. Like, and imagine the stress. You think your infant might die. And he tells her he can't come home because he's got important work to do in New York. In other words, I mean, honestly, even if it was just speaking at a conference or meeting with funders or whatever else he was going to do, I don't know what would be so important that you wouldn't say, I can't be here. My son is in the ICU. Let's reschedule. But his important work, from what's come out in the Epstein emails, is that he was meeting Jeffrey Epstein. And in fact, their relationship was quite a bit more intimate than he alluded to, by far. So the reason I'm using that example, though, is that both in the larger world and I don't care whether it's actors, political figures, other prominent people, the people who are coming out as being very different from they purported to be are in all walks of life. But some things that they had in common were wealth, privilege, high-powered positions, charismatic personalities. And it's, some of the people will surprise you, some may not, but it's natural for us to put our trust in people who are telling us to put our trust in them. It's natural for us to want to look up to people who seem to have more information or something that we don't, and maybe we would like to. It's natural for people who are so charismatic. It's uncanny sometimes how good they are at enlisting support and making us doubt our own misgivings about them. And that's really the larger thing. Because if you had told me 2 weeks ago that I was going to read about Peter Attia in the Epstein files, that would have just blown my mind. He really wasn't on my radar. Again, when I looked at his emails, his like newsletter, I just thought, this guy always seems a little narcissistic to me. It's not a fit. My attention wouldn't have been on him any more than that because there's so many other things on my radar, just like with you. You've got a million things you're being bombarded with every day, millions of bits of information. You've got your own stuff going on in your own life that is demanding more of your attention. But our intuition is a powerful tool that could potentially save our lives. And even in situations where it is not a life or death thing, our intuition can be something that can help us navigate life better. Now, I've talked about intuition before. This is not a pitch for you to buy any of my stuff or take my course or any of that. I just want that to be my disclaimer because you don't need any one person's stuff. You're born with intuition. And there are lots of different ways and lots of different people who can help you develop it. So please know this isn't about that. But this is about the fact that, just like you have your more mundane senses, right? You're taking in information all the time. Every once in a while, you will come across information that will stay a little longer or stand out a little bit differently for you. And oftentimes that's worth paying attention. Well, same with intuitive information. And to me, intuitive information is something that we consider with all the other information available to us. And it's not a static process. It's not usually. It's, we get information, we get a hunch about something, we have an impression of somebody, and we reserve the right to kind of put those thoughts, feelings, and observations on a shelf in our minds and wait for more data to come in if that's what seems like the right thing. If it feels really strong, maybe we should consider whether we should trust it a little bit more. And I'm going to tell you, but before the end of this podcast, one thing you can do that might be one of the biggest factors in developing your own intuition. You don't have to pay anybody to do it. You could go do it right after this podcast episode. But our intuition can tell us when somebody who seems wonderful maybe isn't. Again, a lot of people are talking about Peter Attia today, so he's just an example. I don't have a personal investment in him. There are so many people in these files, it's overwhelming to the senses. He's one of many. And I don't know exactly what he did. I know he didn't go see his son in the ICU, but, I don't know what else he did. But he's handsome, to use as an example. When people are attractive, we know that the research shows we may be more likely to believe them or be engaged by them. He's a fit guy. He's charismatic. He is eloquent. So I don't know if maybe that's not the word, but well-spoken. So he frames something and we're like, oh, wow, that makes sense. He's got a huge platform on social media. There's also something called the halo effect. And it's when you associate with other people in a certain realm, there's a little bit of a spillover from their kind of aura or what we assume about them onto the person hanging out with them. It's why you see people loving to post pictures with celebrities or their favorite, idol in whatever realm. It's because there's this feeling like, oh, it lends extra credibility to them. And that's actually how, that in and of itself isn't a bad thing. It's like a neutral thing. It's just a thing. But not great people know this and will use it to enhance their own perceived importance or credibility. But your intuition can sometimes cut through the BS or smell it. And again, you get to choose how and when and if you act on it. And we're going to get more into that in a minute. So I'm going to take a quick break because I do about this point in every episode. And actually, while I do, please feel free to like the podcast, subscribe, tell a friend, leave me a comment, leave me a review because it really does help. And think about leaving me some comments about what you'd like to hear more of, because that helps me to bring useful content to you. Again, I'll be back in a few moments, so stay tuned, and then we'll talk more about intuition and how it might save your life. I'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. So in this episode, we're talking about trusting your intuition and why that's important. I'll get to how you can further fine-tune your ability to tap into your intuition and to recognize it and recognize the difference between mental noise and your thoughts, feelings, hopes, and fears, our biases. We all have them. Everybody does. But how to tell the difference between that and intuition. I want to just share some not super heavy examples though of intuition. And I've shared some of them before, others not maybe, and again, they don't have to be weighty, but you'll find out how your intuition communicates with you. For me, it's usually a variety of ways, a variety of senses. Sometimes it's one more strongly than another. So the first thing is just, and again, it's pretty benign, but it's just an example. But our intuition comes through in ways that sometimes are counter to the other data available to us at the time. And here's what I mean. So when I graduated from college, job market was terrible. I interviewed for a bunch of things, really wanted a job, understandable. And so I interviewed for an advertising agency job. I really wanted to, at the time, this is a long time ago, but wanted a creative job. And at this agency, it was a small agency, the people seemed very nice and friendly, and it was very small. The owner of the company said, hey, we don't have an opening on the creative side, but we have one on the account side. And I said to him, I was kind of disappointed. I said, it's too bad I was really looking for something creative. And he said, well, listen, within 6 months, there will be an opening and we'll put you on the creative side. So, just do the account side for now. And at that moment, and this is a long time ago and it's still vivid for me, I had two immediate, clear perceptions. So one was that he was being truthful. I didn't get the sense that he was lying to me. I think he meant it at the time. I don't think he was heavily invested either way. I think he just needed to hire somebody and was like, oh yeah, why not? I'm sure something will open up in 6 months on the creative side. But the other thing that came through very clear as a very clear knowing, which is claircognizance, is the technical term for clear knowing, without knowing how you know it, is I knew that would not happen. I knew that despite what he was telling me, it was just this weird, clear, time feels suspended at the moment. He's never going to do that. It's not going to happen. And it didn't feel, this is how you know it's intuition and not your fears or pessimism. There was no emotion attached to it. And one of the things you'll notice when an intuition is really intuition, it comes through neutrally. It doesn't matter what the information is, even if it's awful. Even if we would think that, it comes through emotionally neutrally. And the emotion that we have might be a reaction to it, like, oh no, that's not what I was hoping for. But that is different from the flavor of the information that comes through. When it's a fear of ours, it comes through feeling like anxiety provoking. When it's something we're really craving, we feel the longing attached to it. That's not intuition. Intuition is emotionally neutral. And that's what it was in that moment. It was like a very clear flash of knowing it would never happen. And in fact, that's what happened. And in 6 months, 7 months, I said, I remember you'd mentioned this, and you know what? It wasn't going to happen. They were going to hire somebody at a higher level for the only creative opening that was coming up. I would have had to stay on the account side. I hated my job. I didn't like working there, and I left. And that's a super benign example of intuition. A more weighty one, and I think I've talked about this before, but I'm just it's not a bad one, it's just life. So I was very close to my maternal grandfather, and my grandparents, when I was 19, moved to Florida. It was like a lifelong dream. Just to get out of the cold, they moved from Queens to Florida. They moved to be near my grandfather's two brothers. My grandparents were in their late 60s at the time. And for a month and a half, and by the way, this isn't necessarily what your intuition will come through about. For some reason, this is a theme in a lot of my intuitions, but my grandfather had gotten a clean bill of health. It's not that he was like a super healthy dude, but he, he had been going to his doctor and he had been, Barney, you look great. But anyway, for a month and a half, and I think it came through so long and so intensely because it was going to be a big thing for me. But no matter what I did, I kept getting the stronger and stronger and stronger feeling that he would pass soon. And it's not that there was any event that happened, but it was like to the point where it felt like having on like a piece of clothing that doesn't fit and it feels uncomfortable. And that's an understatement. But anyway, as we got closer, and around the New Year, we were going to Florida to be with my grandparents, and they had literally only been there a few months. And it got to the point where I couldn't bear it. I couldn't shake it. It was something ever present. This is an unusual thing. It's not usual for this to be so protracted. But again, it was a big event in my life and I was very close to him. But anyway, I remember a few days before we got there, I spoke with them over the phone and I found myself, I was 19 years old. I blurted out, "Grandpa, wait for us." And he said, "What do you mean, wait for what?" And I just caught myself and I said, "Oh, to make the chicken soup," because he used to make this Italian chicken soup that I loved. And he said, "Oh, okay." But I mean, by the time I got down there, the 48 hours before he passed felt unbearable. Like I could barely contain myself. And anyway, long story short, he did pass while we were down there. It was very sudden and it was overwhelming. And my psyche, my intuition was trying to tell me, I think, that this was coming to prepare me. But it was also, somebody might say, "This is awful. I would never want that to happen to me." And it probably won't happen to you. I mean, maybe it will, but it's not, it doesn't happen to everybody. I don't even think it happens to most people. But for whatever reason, that's one of the things my intuition picks up on. But if there is a silver lining in there, it's that I was paying more attention to the relationship I had with him, to trying to be emotionally present, to be spending time with him, to check in on him by phone. And I think that mattered. And so that fear, that worry, that knowing, it was very weighty then. If I had the knowing now, it would be something that I would hold differently. But it gave me an opportunity to be more present in our relationship because I knew that the earthly version was coming to a close. Intuition. Sometimes your intuition, I think most of the time your intuition will be something really simple, like, you normally take the same route to work every day, and you probably are on autopilot half the time when you are driving that way. And one day you're like, "Oh, I feel like I want to take another route to work." And it just comes through as a clear, maybe it's an image in your mind of the route you're going to take. Maybe it's a clear flash. That's clairvoyance if you see it. Or maybe you hear yourself saying in your mind, "Oh, take the other route." That's clairaudience if you hear it. Or maybe it's just a knowing, like, "Oh, I don't want to take my normal route to work today. I want to take this other route." And claircognizance, clear knowing. And maybe you find that when you get to work that you avoided a 3-hour traffic backup because there was a traffic accident. Or maybe you'll never know. But because you've learned to trust your intuition, you take that other route. And who knows? Your intuition will give you a vibe, perhaps, when, and again, it doesn't always have to be this heavy thing, but it could be something that, is meaningful enough to you. You're looking for a babysitter, maybe every day, or maybe you're looking for somebody when you go away for work for 2 days, and you're meeting 3 candidates, and they all seem equally pretty good, and maybe one is extra personable, but you just feel like every time you think you're going to call them and offer them the job, you feel a hesitation. And even if you don't know what it is yet. And maybe that babysitter, maybe they're not going to be horrible. Maybe they're just not going to, maybe you'll come home and your place will be a mess. Or maybe you'll come home and, your kid will tell you that, oh, they didn't really play with me or take me to the park like they said they were going to. They were on their phone the whole time. You know what I'm saying, though? There's so many ways in our daily lives when our intuition can communicate with us in a way that could make our lives better. But it could be that, again, you're going on a date with somebody and you get a weird feeling, or you get a weird feeling right before that date that I don't think I should go. And maybe there's no observable reason in terms of normal data, like they didn't say anything super off or whatever. Maybe they're just not great for you. Maybe it saves your life. I don't know. I don't think our intuition is going to communicate with us. If you're looking for this is not how it's going to go down, by the way, where every single decision you make or everything you do, it's going to weigh on buy this bag of carrots and not this brand. It's not necessary, and it would just be more mental noise, unless there's something seriously wrong with the one bag of carrots, in which case you might actually get a vibe as you go to buy it if it's spoiled or something. You're not going to get an intuition about that. You don't need to know about every possible version of every possible outcome in your life. That's not what I think intuition is most useful for. But it can help us when somebody who seems on the surface like they would be a great whatever employee or boss or friend, and maybe you're picking up on something that feels not quite right. Maybe you're watching a public figure give a speech and asking for your money or your vote or whatever, and something just seems a little off. Pay attention to that, even if you just put it on the shelf and wait for more data. You always reserve the right to revise or fine-tune what you decide to do or your ultimate assessment based on more data. Often we raise people to deny their own impressions. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from people in my own field that it's not real, even though they have never reviewed the over 100 years of research that's pretty clearly demonstrated that it's just a natural faculty. And in fact, intuition is trainable. Pay attention. Your intuition can tell you, which doctor is most likely to be able to help you with the condition you're dealing with. And maybe you won't get a vibe, and maybe it's because you're supposed to have some sort of experience, or learning experience. I don't know. I don't know everything. And please know, if anybody suggests that they do know everything, you shouldn't even need your intuition to tell you to run in the other direction. No one knows everything. And there's more than can be explained by any of us. You know what I'm trying to say. Your intuition can help you to make a decision about a relationship that you've been putting off. I'm going to give you an example that I have permission to use because I've used it before, but, and this person's told me. But long story short, many years ago, before texting was as common as it is now, the first cell phones that allowed for texting, believe it or not, most people I don't even think used that function. There was a point where every technology was new, including texting. So anyway, a friend of mine was married to this person, had children with this person. It would have been, it wasn't a super harmonious relationship at that point, but they never would have left because if you have kids, you usually try to make your relationship work. But anyway, one day they were getting ready to go to a family member's house for a holiday. And anyway, the husband was in the shower, and my friend was in those quiet moments where you're getting ready. Maybe you're pulling out your clothes and deciding what to wear, or maybe you're making the bed and tidying up your room before you head out. And she just had a sudden thought, check his texts. Now, at this time, I don't even think she texted. Today, people would say, oh, yeah, well, of course, if you have some suspicion something's not okay, check their texts. And I'm not advising anybody to violate anybody's privacy here. The point of this is that at a time when that wasn't a common thing, this is quite a while ago, she did something she'd never done before. And she went to her husband's phone, opened it up and looked at his texts. I don't even think he had a password at that point. And sure enough, it was clear he was having a relationship with somebody else, and she hadn't been happy, but this was the thing that made her say, that's it, I'm out. And that was one of the scariest things she ever had to do. It's very hard to, when you have young kids, leave a relationship. I think anybody can get what I'm saying here. But the point is, it just came through very clearly. It was a clear voice, like in her own mind, clairaudience, kind of like her own voice, but yet kind of it came unbidden. Now, somebody could say, well, maybe she suspected something, maybe it was unconscious, whatever, it doesn't matter. It was important for her to know, and for some reason it was important to come through then, and in the quiet moments is when that information was able to come through. And she is happier now. And I'm not saying it was an easy road. It wasn't. But the point is that there is a part of us that wants to help us to navigate life better. Now, I'm going to get in a moment to the one thing you can do that might be the most effective thing at developing your intuition, or certainly the start, and it's free. But, I want to be clear on how, again, a few things you will know it's not intuition. If something comes through and it feels like a fear, or it comes through with anxiety, or you have a bias about something, and this is in line with that bias, or it seems like a runaway train of thoughts, that's not intuition. And it can be hard to tell. It's why it takes a lot of practice. It's also why the best psychics in the world, the ones who've been tested at universities and research institutes, they're about 85% accurate. Our intuition comes through our own mental filter, our own thoughts, feelings, and so forth. And intuition tends to be fairly subtle, quiet, and fleeting. And it's not the whole thing. It's not like you have a 2-hour movie when it's intuitive. It's like a flash. And it's a flash that means something and tells you to pay attention. One of the ways we can learn to pay attention to our intuition that is invaluable, honestly, is through meditation. Meditation, a completely secular practice. It does not, I just want to say, because I know some people are more or less religious who listen to this podcast, it is secular. It is a cognitive exercise. Now, do people talk about meditation as a type of spiritual development tool? It absolutely can be. But if you think about it, I'm talking about mindfulness specifically, just moving your awareness to something neutral, setting aside 5 minutes to start, set a timer, and move your awareness to the sensation of your breathing, moving in your nostrils and into your lungs and then out. And then as you notice the millions of thoughts that try to break into your awareness, observe them as if you're observing a cloud drifting across the sky. And the reason why that metaphor is used so often is because almost all of us have, at some point gazed at the clouds. You can watch them floating across the sky, but you can't actually pull them closer or slow them down or speed them up. Some people think you can, I don't know. But most of us would say, you can only observe them. And regardless of what you think or feel about them, they're just going to drift off across the sky. And our thoughts can be like that too. And what that does is it creates space. It creates these tiny spaces between our thoughts. In those spaces, the subtle communication, the more quiet communication of our intuition can be much clearer. The more you do this, the more you are inviting your intuitive self to come through to you. It's you. It's your inborn apparatus. That's what I'm focusing on here. And then it's not that there aren't other ways to get intuitive information. There are. That's not what we're focusing on in this episode. But the simple act of meditation, if you are not somebody who can yet feel like you can do breath awareness, the most commonly kind of described type of mindfulness, just try being where you are. And what I mean by that is when you're taking a shower, be in the shower. So let your thoughts stay with what is in the confines of that shower. So rather than thinking about the meeting you have coming up at work or the project you're working on or the argument you had with somebody or the conversation you want to have with someone else or what you want to have for lunch tomorrow, keep your attention in the shower when you're showering. So the temperature of the water, the feel of the water on your skin, the smell of your soap and shampoo, the play of light on the tiles, on the wet tiles in the shower, the sound of the water hitting the floor. That's it. Stay with that. Just a minute at a time would still make a difference. Again, in those spaces, that's where intuitive information is clearest. And it can help us in every area of our lives. It can help us to recognize when there really is something that feels not right or unsafe for us, when something is a good opportunity. It can help us to learn to trust ourselves. And a lot of us were raised not to trust ourselves or to put all our trust in authority or to put all our trust in external sources. And we have this reservoir of insight and wisdom and knowledge within us that we're always hopefully further developing. The last thing I want to say, in case people are thinking, oh, intuition, how do I know if that's real? Again, if you think about it like another sense, if you were driving your car and there was a sign up ahead saying bridge out, and you saw that the bridge had collapsed and there was a barricade in the road ahead of you, you would probably stop your car, notice the warning signs, and turn around. And that would save your life. Right? You look at the traffic light when you are driving and it says green and you know it's safe to go. You know it's red and you know you've got to stop. You know it's yellow and you should be paying attention and slowing down, right? So it's just another type of sign. It is another type of sensory information available to you, right? And I think it's worth developing. And again, you already have the innate wiring for this to be helpful to you. I want to hear what you think. If you have intuitive experiences that you'd like to share with me, please do. You can leave me a comment on social media. You can join my email list. I'll leave a link to the email list. And you'll get an email from me, maybe like twice a month, 3 times a month tops, and you can reply. I don't give my email out over the podcast for obvious reasons, but you would get an email and you could reply if you want. Leave a comment on the YouTube version of the podcast. But I want to hear from you. I want to know what you'd like more of. And again, as always, thank you for being with me. I so appreciate you and the time you do spend with me. And I wish you all the best now and always. So until next time, until we meet again, as always, be well.